This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help me produce more content like this, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. How many times have you heard, "You have to pick the lesser of two evils," or "You have to vote for blank even if you don't like him because we need to beat the other guy"? This mindset, which leads to the team sportification of politics and countless other problems, is caused by how our elections currently work. In our current system, the candidate with the most votes wins. This kind of winner-take-all voting often yields elected officials who only win a relatively small portion of the total votes, leaving huge numbers of people feeling like they're not being represented or that their vote doesn't matter. What if there was a way to reform voting so that everyone's vote counts, candidates are more beholden to the people, and we're able to break the stranglehold of the two-party corporate duopoly? In this episode, we're going to talk about ranked choice voting, a system that does all that and a lot more. I'm sure many of you have voted before, but for the younger viewers in the audience, here's what casting a ballot looks like. Let's take a hypothetical local election. You walk into your polling station, check in with the election officials, and are directed to a voting booth. On the screen are a few options for your preferred candidate for, let's say, mayor. You pick your favorite option, submit your ballot, and you're done. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, let's think about this for a minute. Imagine there are two major political factions in your city, the Gray Party and the Purple Party, and it's shaping up to be a close race. But the Grays and Purples aren't the only political parties hoping to win your vote. There are also two smaller parties, the Pink Party and the Orange Party. In a winner-take-all system, the Pinks and Oranges don't have any real chance of winning the election, because people are more likely to vote against the major party that they don't like in favor of the other major party. So, the people who hate the Gray Party will vote Purple, and those who hate the Purple Party will vote Gray. In the months leading up to the election, people will say things like, "Don't vote for Orange, that's just throwing away your vote," or "A vote for Pink is a vote for Purple." These arguments are obnoxious, but you can understand why people would make them if they think the smaller parties don't stand a chance. To them, any vote not cast for their candidate might as well not be cast. Fast forward to the election, and the results are in. Purple earned 36% of the vote, Gray 32%, Orange 17%, and Pink 15%. In this winner-take-all system, the candidate from the Purple Party would become the mayor, despite the majority of citizens voting for a different candidate. How can we make it so that a candidate has to represent the will of more than just 30% or so of the population? Let's take the same election, but use a ranked choice voting system, also known as RCV or preferential voting, instead. You walk into your polling place, check in, and take a look at your ballot. Now, instead of just filling in one bubble, you have to rank all 4 candidates in order from your favorite to least favorite. You like Orange's policies the best, so that's your number 1 pick. Gray is next, then Pink, and finally Purple as your least favorite. You submit your ballot, and you're done. It's not all that different from before.
No, but then you can't, because then we could have multiple parties, and outside of our current duopoly, it would trapped in elo hell in ranked voting. You scared me. I didn't know you were being sarcastic for a second. Wait, what? Yeah, I was.
But this kind of voting can have a big impact on elections. Let's have a look at the results. In this hypothetical, let's say Purple won 30% of the votes, Gray 28%, Orange 22%, and Pink 20%. In a winner-take-all election, Purple would win with just 30% of the vote. What makes ranked choice different is that in order to win, a candidate has to break the 50% threshold. If there's not a clear majority once all the first-place votes have been counted, the candidate with the least support is removed, and the people who voted for that person as their number 1 pick will have their second-place candidate counted. So, in this scenario, Pink would be removed and the counting would continue. With the second-place votes counted, Purple is up to 39%, Gray 40%, and Orange 21%. That still leaves us without a clear majority, so the process is repeated. This time Orange is removed, and the voters who had Orange as their number 1 have their second-place pick accounted for. In the final tally, Gray is up to 55% and Purple 45%. In this scenario, the Gray Party candidate would win the election, having passed the
Holy shit, I literally had like a heat flash. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I think I need to eat.
50% mark. By using a preferential voting system, the candidate who eventually wins is guaranteed to have the broadest support among voters. This is a huge step in the right direction, and unsurprisingly, ranked choice voting is becoming more and more popular as average people feel like they're not being represented by either major political party. To some, ranked choice may sound like a radical idea, but it's really not. Today, RCV is used at the local level in over 20 cities across the country, and was used by all voters in Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, and Wyoming for the 2020 Democratic presidential primaries. Maine will become the first state to use ranked choice voting for the general election later this year. Outside the US, countries like Ireland, New Zealand, Scotland, and Australia have been using ranked choice voting for years, and the system is widely praised for giving voters more say in who gets to represent them. Okay, so it's a popular system that's been around for a while. That's all well and good, but let's look at some of the actual benefits of implementing preferential voting. As we saw in our hypothetical election, ranked choice guarantees that the winner has majority support. If you stop and think about it, it just seems absurd that a candidate could win an election with 30% of the total votes. Ranked choice voting fixes that problem. To use a real-world example, Maine switched to RCV in part because 9 of the 11 gubernatorial races between 1994 and 2014 were won by a candidate who earned less than 50% of the vote. Besides ensuring the winner has a broad coalition of support, ranked choice also promotes a less toxic campaign environment. In a winner-take-all race, the candidates benefit from running negative ads against each other. After all, depriving their
Our 6-3 permanent supermajority conservative Supreme Court will never, ever, ever in a million years allow this to happen. At the very most, you'll be able to get this at like local levels, okay? My brother, a lefty, is against this because he says it will lead to more centrist candidates. I mean, a lot of places where there is, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly going to be issues with this as well, especially considering the fact that voter participation is not exclusively suppressed by feeling like their voices aren't heard or anything. Like, we have the Electoral College, we have sorry, at the state level as well, but it's not going to happen for fucking, or maybe it'll happen, I don't know. As if it's worse than what we have now. Nothing is worse than what we have now. We also have 2 parties, so we have 2 major parties. In 2019 UK elections, SNP got 48 seats with 4% total votes. Lib Dems got 11 seats with 11% of the vote. Tories won outright majority parliament with 42% of the vote.
Opponent of a vote is almost as good as earning one for themselves. This leads to nasty, bitter, unpleasant campaigns that make everyone involved look bad and distracts from important policy differences. With ranked choice voting, the candidates are competing to earn not only first place, but second, third, fourth place votes in order to have the most overall support. So they have to appeal to voters who may not be a part of what they consider their base. Instead of making their opponents look bad, the candidates have to make themselves look good, which involves reaching out to as many potential voters as possible and making their case without mudslinging. This could lead to better voter engagement and less animosity between voter groups. One study conducted in 2016 found that voters in places using ranked choice voting were much more likely to report a positive campaign experience than a negative one. A preferential voting system also strips gerrymandering of its power. Gerrymandering, the process of elected officials drawing their own district maps, is a huge problem in our current system because officials can assume the vast majority of people in each district will either vote Democrat or Republican. With this knowledge, they can draw absurdly shaped districts in order to corral as many of a certain type of voter into the district as possible, or exclude certain voter blocks by carving them out of the district. If we replace our current voting system with ranked choice, these
Gerrymandering is so fucking transparently corrupt and awful. It is really insane to consider. Like, the way that we draw out districts is so wild. Best democracy in the world, baby.
These maps will be effectively useless because third-party candidates will no longer be doomed to failure. This leads us to the most important aspect of ranked choice voting. It breaks the stranglehold of the two-party corporate duopoly. Right now, the Democrats and Republicans know that they don't really have to appeal to voters. All they have to do is offer a figurehead who represents opposition to the other party. How many people do you know who are actually excited to vote for Joe Biden? Probably not very many. The vast majority of Joe Biden voters are only voting for him because the other option is Donald Trump. And I'm sure there are some Trump supporters who feel they have to vote against Biden. This is not how it should be. The candidates should have to appeal to the voters and offer them more.
Dude, what do you think about mandatory voting? What are you talking about? Like, compulsory voting cannot be established in this country when voting is not on a national holiday or even the fucking weekend. Okay? That's insanely cruel. Imagine they suppress the vote and then they're like, it's mandatory. Like, what the fuck would you do? like it's not even on it has to be on a national it has to be on a national holiday, and there can't be any preventative measures that stop you from going out and voting. Like, imagine being like, yeah, you have to go out and vote, but also at the same time, like, you can't because you're working. Anyway.
More than just a spite vote against the other guy. By implementing ranked choice voting, you can vote for the candidate who actually represents your values. Then, if you want to pick Biden or whomever else as a second place safety pick, you can do that. You get to vote for your favorite, and if they don't get enough support, your vote isn't lost, it just moves on to your second pick. That's how you pressure the corporate duopoly. They don't want to offer us anything. But if we have more options to choose from and they see their numbers dropping, the Democrats and the Republicans will have to actually start listening to the people. Imagine that. Elected officials actually caring about the will of the people. Ranked choice voting is perhaps the only path forward for electoral reform. It's the only way we can make our voices heard through the ballot box. The average
holiday in every country is mandatory. LMAO, what's that argument? Okay, first let's establish the holiday, and then we can establish both. I don't have a problem with, like, I mean, I don't know. I think, like, forcing people to go out and vote is still kind of weird. But, like, before you do that, I think, like, turning it into a national holiday is definitely a lot better than, like, mandatory voting. What the fuck, Hasan?
Oh, you're such a
I mean,
Hasan.
Look, I don't give a fuck if you make it mandatory or not personally. I just don't think it would work here. Unless there was an incentive. Like, tax credit incentives. Yeah, positive incentivization rather than like taxing someone who doesn't vote, or rather than like fining someone who doesn't vote. Giving them a positive incentive in the form of like a tax credit would be better.
Voter is vastly more progressive than their elected officials. Most people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, want to see meaningful healthcare reform because our current system is so unbelievably expensive. The same goes for green energy investment, education reform, and countless other policies. Neither major party will concede to these demands because they don't represent average people. They represent the interests of the obscenely wealthy and the very corporations who benefit from the predatory healthcare industry or fossil fuel industry.
True, I never thought about that, actually. I didn't consider that. Mandatory voting doesn't mean you have to literally vote for either party. You could actually just not vote, but you have to fill it out still, right? And send it empty. So that does actually make sense. I don't know why I was like thinking that you have to literally vote. Sorry. My brain is not good right now, okay? I have bad brain. I have case of the bad brain currently.
His name is
Industry
Hasan.
or the military-industrial complex. Ranked choice voting allows people to vote for the candidates the big players consider fringe or radical, aka the candidates who actually represent the will of the people. Take New York City, for example. In 2021, New York will roll out preferential voting for city races. Progressive groups like the DSA and Working Families Party have a big presence in New York. And with ranked choice, they could field candidates and endorse others as second or third choice picks, and have a real shot at changing the city for the better. This will also put a lot of pressure on New York's mainstream politicians. If they want the support of the left, they'll have to appeal to progressive voters instead of ignoring them as they have in the past. Imagine, instead of a campaign built on pandering to wealthy real estate moguls, the conversation could instead shift to sustainability.
I can see how this 100% would be terrible for the left. While leftist ideas are more popular, certainly, I absolutely can see, like, without establishing like easier burdens on voting, without allowing poor people to vote, without making it so that like poor people can easily fucking vote, I absolutely see this basically securing a permanent Democratic, but like a center-right Democratic
Hasan.
Party leadership. Because currently, when you look at the demographics, when you look at the people who do vote, when you look at the people whose vote has been suppressed historically, you recognize that like the smaller number of people that end up voting, the number of people that like feel like their voices are heard or their interests are represented in our current two-party system, those people that end up going out and voting are wealthier.
Oh, you're such a big
They
man,
are.
Hassan.
They have
Thank you
free
for
time to be
changing
able to
my
go
mind
out
on
and
things
vote.
and making me a better person. Love you.
Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Fair housing, urban farming, and public transportation. The DSA and the Working Families Party have done a tremendous job in bringing the tenets of eco-socialism into the New York conversation, fighting back against the constant push for increasing profits at the expense of human life, and proposing a platform that could serve as a model for the sustainable city of the future. A Green New Deal, 100% renewable energy by 2030, public control of energy, and investment in urban farms represent just a few of the policies made possible by progressive voices paired with ranked choice voting. Whether you agree with these policies is your decision.
Mo Friction, thank you for the 20 tier 1 gift subs.
But that's what makes ranked choice voting so appealing. It's your decision. You're not being held captive because you're told you need to vote against the other guy. You get to vote your conscience, pick the candidates who best reflect your values, and still have a safety candidate if you really want to. It might take a while before enough people feel comfortable to stop voting for the Democrats and Republicans entirely. But that won't be possible at all without ranked choice voting. Ranked choice is growing more popular by the day. It's got bipartisan support, it expands democracy, and it puts real power back into the hands of normal people. It's time we made the switch. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this kind of content is supported by my patrons on Patreon.
You're gonna buy any all gas no brakes merch? Probably not. I don't know.
The American people are tired of women.
Why would I do that?
Hassle.
Firework mushroom? No.
God, those communists are amazing.
You're right about that point, but that's already an issue within our first past the post system. The smaller parties would have to build voting support infrastructure, so issues would exist in terms of funding. Yeah.